You are looking at face tank and Berserker that can eat up direct attacks of Maven, Sun Shower in elemental damage during hidden arena encounter, walk over on death effects and volatiles, and do not care about detonate corpse strong boxes. And all that thanks to new Mahuxotl Machination unique item. This item is combined with rather clever damage mitigation from Tempered by War Keystone and most important Formless Inferno unique helmet. With that in mind, build is overcapping chaos and fire resistance to maximum 90% while totally ignoring and actually benefiting from negative cold and lightning resistances. This build possesses solid single target on bosses and can burst down Awakener 9 Conquerors under 10 seconds. On map clear side, clever synergy of Doryani Touch from Doryani Fist coupled with Rage and Berserk makes for very fast and speedy mapper. And most important, that single target, clear and defense makes buff tier 16 ultimatums complete easy mode. These are the maps shown on the background, and in this video I will go over passive tree, skill and support gems, mandatory gear and of course Ascendancy choices. Showcased build budget end up on 12 exalted orb mark, with most expensive purchase being Enlightened support level 4 for 3.5 exalted orbs. And later in this video there will be additional gameplay footage for last phases of Maven, Sirius, as well as full hidden arena encounter. Let's glance over the passive tree to understand where build is actually going in the end, to understand the actual starting point. Build is rather stretched between sockets for clusters and ordinary jewels on the passive tree. Build is running 3 medium and 1 large thread of hope with negative 20% elemental resistance. Yes, getting less elemental resistance is actually very beneficial. This is very important and pretty much build defining for damage and defense. By running Tempered by War Keystone from Little Pride unique jewel in the name of Rakiata, build redirect 50% of cold and lightning damage to fire resistance. Then, build is using Mahuxotl Machination to get Divine Flash Keystone, and with Divine Flash build redirect 50% of all elemental damage to chaos resistance as well. So build already redirect 100% of direct cold and lightning damage to chaos and fire resistances. And to get physical damage mitigation, this build is running Formless Inferno unique helmet to benefit greatly from overcapped and overstacked fire resistance. Most confusing part of the build is Mahuxotl Machination interactions, and here are all effects that you get from that unique item. On the basic level you get Divine Flash tanking, your energy shield and life regeneration does nothing, energy shield starts at 0, while your life leech is overleeching into the shield and also is doubled. And once your energy shield reach 100%, you will get Everlasting Sacrifice. With that keystone build get extra 5% to maximum resistances. That means that build can get to maximum 90% cap on fire and chaos only by getting to 85% default resistance. And since we do not care about cold and lightning resistances, that is relatively easy to achieve. Everlasting Sacrifice would be pretty much permanent buff on the map clear thanks to synergy with Doryani Fist unique gloves. Every time you kill a monster, build get flat energy shield. Pretty much killing 5 monsters would net you Everlasting Sacrifice instantly. But the main magic happens with the resistance overcap. And here are the mandatory items to set the fire and chaos resistance to exactly 85% resistance overcap. Most cost-efficient way to set overcap of fire and chaos resistance are cluster jewels. Build already get 80% of chaos resistance with Divine Flash Keystone, and by only getting 2 Born of Chaos notables from 2 small cluster jewels, build is already at 86%. Add up Everlasting Sacrifice and you get your maximum 90% chaos resistance. On fire resistance you need a bit more effort. First, running level 25 Purity of Fire from Doryani Delusion boots is very solid choice, but it is not enough to get to 85% fire res. 85% fire resistance cap is actually achieved from chaining 2 Summer Commander notables on 1 medium and 1 small cluster jewels. And as you can remember, builders are already running Formless Inferno and benefit greatly from all that extra fire resistance overstack. So at this point, majority of passive defense layers are set. And before we transition to fun part with big damage and clear speed, is there any actual things to avoid on this build? Can it face tank everything? Build have negative lightning and cold resistances, and it of course can relatively relatively easy die to cold and lightning damage over time. But most likely you never heard about things like that. And yes, it is very rare. Cold damage over time can be encountered in Delve, but I actually failed to find that for the actual video footage. And actual Maven ground circles of
I crungled this encounter, let's do it again,
deal exactly either cold or lightning damage over time. But actually build have enough of flat HP to deal with that Maven mechanic, even while actually face tanking direct damage from Maven itself. And other things that I actually discovered during testing this build were actual lightning damage over time from Baron Marks. It actually deal laughable damage, so you can totally ignore that. But the actual lightning orb damage from hidden arena with beyond bosses deal ungodly amount either lightning damage over time or it just straight out backed. I have an idea, just avoid them at all costs. And here are the actual effective HP numbers for passive defenses, and here are actual numbers for active tank clerics with Everlasting Sacrifice. As you can see, build gets huge boost to effective HP by overcapping to 90% resistance. That means that mobs with a negative elemental resistance is relatively dangerous. And by dangerous I mean you can still face tank your Beyond Flame Blast, but it looks kinda scary, and people will of course complain in the comments that build is not tanky at all, it looks kinda scary, you know? Doing ultimatums with that modifier it kinda can net you negative results. As they say in rocket science, we encountered an anomaly.
We have had an anomaly.
And speaking of big damage and negative elemental resistances, my build is actually going for quad stack of Thread of Hopes and negative 20% elemental rest from each of them. Well, as majority of Doryani Fizz builds, this build is running Doryani Prototype unique body armor. With that armor, negative lightning resistance is becoming major offensive trait of the builds. And major power of that combination lies in total rudiment of elemental curses and elemental exposure, since you already match your level of negative lightning resistance on everything in the game. The only sad part in damage stacking is that Tempered by War Keystone is actually use mathematics from parallel dimension, where less of negative value is actually positive value. So I actually bet that antimatter warp drive would be probably discovered on accident by Path of Exile servers, and our planet would most likely collapse into supercharged quantum black hole and... Whoa, wait a second, this is Path of Exile video. So let's actually talk and stack about big damage, big clear speed with Doryani Fist. And here what we will do. Berserker. Yes, literal Berserker.
A vicious, violent man with extremely low life expectancy.
Rage's damage, Rage's speed, Rage's damage mitigation, of course from Berserk skill gem, because well,
Berserker.
Build is getting Rage from Crave the Slaughter Ascendancy and extra damage with Rage stack from Rite of Ruin. Then with Warbringer, build gets more damage and can actually proc instant maximum Rage from Warcry with Red Blade Banner unique shield on a weapon swap. But that is relatively limited to chill and easy encounters like Conquerors. Meanwhile, the actual Seismic Cry Warcry can be actually bounded to mouse button 1 and pretty much automated. Build is getting Cold Arms Keystone for overall smoothness of automation with the Warcry, and big damage and a lot of utility comes from Cluster Jewel setup for exerted attacks. But first of all, build needs a big Cluster Jewel to get full setup, and here the most important notable is Drive the Destruction to get actual life leech for our build. Be sure to get 8 small passive jewel for that least point spent and maybe get some extra damage with your budget. After that, build is running 2 medium Cluster Jewels for exerted attacks and Warcry utility. Here are important notables to get, there are only 4 of them. First of them, Lead by Example to get almost permanent onslaught, then Hunting Shot for big damage with Intimidation and Taunt, Cry Wolf notable to counteract negative effects of Warbringer Ascendancy, and Mob Mentality notable for backup charge generation and just plain damage. Then next to Cluster Jewel setup we have Thread of Hope number 1. Medium range is to set and get Escalation notable for nice life recovery and cooldown recovery for our Seismic Cry, and also Unwavering Stance for that permanent source of stun immunity. And speaking of Thread of Hope setups, let's go over Thread of Hope number 2 and 3 with very important aura stacking setup. Build is running defensive Arctic Armor Aura. It makes so much sense with our elemental damage redirection to fire and chaos resistance. Then Wrath and Herald of Thunder to do major heavy lifting and big damage. And then of course Blood and Sand that plays a big part in area of effect and extra damage on single target. To afford these 4 auras on top of independent Purity of Fire aura, build gets Enlightened support on level 4 into this aura 5 link. And after that, there are several things to do on the passive tree as well. Second Thread of Hope setup with large ring saves 1 point to get full sovereignty cluster with reduced mana reservation. Also here build can allocate extra 10% life notable and extra damage with amplify notable. And in the case of lower budget or temporary solution, build can get actually Righteous Decree notable to feed every single aura without very handy 1% reduced reservation corruption implicit. This implicit is relatively easy to get on single Abyssal Jewel in Stygian Wise, but also it can be found for high budget on Thread of Hope or even on Cluster Jewels. With Thread of Hope number 3 and Medium Ring, build gets Champion of the Coast and saves another 2 points, and then gets Rampart notable for big damage with Fortify effect and saves 4 more points. And to finish off reduced reservation, build also locates Charisma Anoint on Rare Amulet. With all that, build can afford 5 big auras and even independent Clarity aura on level 1 for extra trigger on Watcher's Eye. But more about that and mana cost management later. Before that, there are a lot of things happening on Thread of Hope number 4 with Medium Ring. Here build actually gets really nice Bravery life notable and own way of generating Frenzy and Endurance charges on clear. And with Versatile stance, build back up Blood and Sand aura effect with extra area of effect and big damage in the Blood stance. So, in the next chapter, let's finally talk about the Doryani Touch support, second large cluster jewel, mana management, active tanky layers, active damage buffs, and of course, very important, build define explicit modifiers on your rare gear. Since Doryani Touch is actually Slam skill, build is running Fist of War support. Then Fortify to reap all the benefits of damage mitigation, of course Rampart notable, and huge area of effect while dealing solid damage. Then elemental damage with attack skill since Doryani Touch deal lightning damage, and then Pulverize support to make completely ridiculous clear area of effect. And as always, this support needs to be slotted directly into Doryani Fist to affect actual Doryani Touch, and as usual in Path of Exile, no links are required, they are already supporting Doryani Touch. Since Doryani Fist have the biggest damage number spread in already very spiky lightning damage type, it is very important to get second large cluster jewel with supercharged notable. That way build is getting around 20 to 25% extra damage. Also near the northwest cluster jewel, build also allocate elemental overload. But there is the big limitation and blessing of Doryani Touch skill. Doryani Touch cannot be evaded, but it will not crit unless you gave up like Jewel Socket and actually insert the critical strike chance there, so you basically losing the damage. So to retain the big damage and to actually trigger even bigger damage with elemental overload, build is running Stormbrand with increased critical strikes. And of course Cooling Strike to have that nice boss finisher, and also as any slam build, slapping Wall Ancestral Protector on this 4 link is very nice idea. So in the end build is getting 2 active damage buffs that are pretty much place and forget. Star Boss or Ultimatum, play Stormbrand and Totems, deal big damage with buffs. Simple as that. Since the build is a bit low on physical damage mitigation, running Molten Shell on level 10 with level 1 cast when damage taken and increased duration support is very natural fit for this build. Builders actually get nice damage mitigation from Berserk, and I actually end up using it as extra flask as soon as I get some rage. And to reduce cooldown of Berserk, build gets of course second wind support, and to benefit from the second wind, I also went for Seismic Cry and Frostblink in this 4 link setup. With gem links aside, first defining part of the rare gear is actually unique Watcher's Eye. As you can remember, there is the level 1 Clarity aura, and of course there is the Watcher's Eye with the minus 10 mana cost under effect of Clarity aura, so from that point build can start building up mana management and actually get to 0 mana cost for every single skill of the builds. On Amulet and Rings, build get either natural or crafted prefix modifier with reduced mana cost, and in total build actually needs up to minus 27 mana cost for everything in the level 20, and can get even as low as minus 24 if the build will use underleveled Frostblink and Stormbrand. Even triple tier 2 crafts with minus 5 mana cost and Watcher's Eye with minus 9 mana cost can achieve exactly that number on minus 24. Next defining part of the gear is actually connection to Formless Inferno unique helmet. While it gets all the fire resistance in the world from Purity of Fire, actually overgearing it will result in increased physical damage mitigation with extra armor from the Formless Inferno. So searching for maximum fire and chaos resistance rolls on jewelry swords is the most sensible approach, and as usual get as much of flat life that you can get from your budget. And most important, get maximum dexterity roll on the amulet to apply that intrinsic catalyst. That way you can simply fix your dexterity on one amulet slot, and of course while build getting quite a bit of intelligence from passive tree, getting last 20 or 30 intelligence proving to be expensive on rare slots. So I just spent for 30 intelligence from notable on the passive tree. Yes, I admitted my lack of intelligence. Speaking of expenses, all the rare gear on the screen is relatively common and costed me between 100 chaos and 1 exalted orb for each slot. As the main min-max territory, you can enchant Doryani Prototype with fire resistance from quality, then farm enchanted labyrinth for % life recovery on kill under effect of rage on your belt, and also getting corrupting Mahuxotl Machination with physical damage taken as elemental or chaos makes a lot of sense. With the flask, get usual bunch of elemental element immunity alongside with anti-bleed panicked life flask, and even getting anti-ignite actually makes sense, since ultimatum ignite can actually stall your life recovery. And as pretty nice gimmick, build can also run Ruby Flask for even more active fire resistance and armor. Yes, Ruby Flask on endgame builds. For Pantheons, I went with Solaris for that reduced physical damage on Sirius, and of course Ruslata Pantheon for nice backup life recovery from Life Flask with the new low life threshold. So this is Mahuxotl, or maybe Mahuxotl, Mahuxotl, Potototl, Popopotl, Machination Doryani Fizz Berserker. Definitely the better build than majority of meta builds out there. Started as a total meme of the build and completely blew me away with insane capabilities. Build have nice clear, with solid single target, have insane tank and actually cost almost nothing compared to majority of meta builds. Well, at least for now. You know how it can end up. 100k views and now 1C item cost like 10x. My only advice to you, go and subscribe to this channel and hit that bell, because that way you can actually snag off those items early on before everybody went and bandwagoned into the builds. On my Patreon you can find extra gameplay footage that does not make any sense on YouTube and make like 5 views, something like full map clears, Maven or serious kills, etc, etc. And also you can always find all that for free, but when I'm actually live on my streams on this address. And as always, feel free to ask your questions down below in the comments section. This channel is really small and I try to answer everything in the comments. And as always, I was Foxy Shanks, and have a nice day, exiles. Foxy Shanks out.